Welcome in, everyone, to another deep dive. This time around, we're going to be looking at maximizing family time. We've got some amazing research lined up here, all about the impact of family time and why those connections are so important, even when they're those smaller moments.
Yeah, and we often hear people say quality time,
Yeah.
but we're going to kind of dig into the why behind that. We'll be pulling from psychology research, child development, and a couple of relationship experts.
I love it. And our first source really goes into those like little moments. It's so easy to get caught up thinking we need to go on these big vacations or have these massive events to really like solidify our bonds as a family. But this research suggests that those everyday interactions are actually the building blocks for those strong relationships.
Exactly. And John Gottman, he's a very well-known relationship researcher, has done a ton of work on this. He found that successful relationships, and this includes family relationships, obviously have a high ratio of positive to negative interactions. It's about like a 5-to-1 ratio.
Mm.
And those positive interactions, he calls those bids for connection. And they can be something as simple as a quick hug or asking about someone's day or, just even a shared smile.
So it's not about going all out all the time. It's really just about being mindful of those little opportunities to connect throughout the day.
Exactly. Like, think about it this way. Each time that we respond positively to a bid for connection, we're making a deposit into the emotional bank account of our relationship. These small positive interactions end up building a foundation of trust and security, which allows us to kind of navigate challenges as they come up more effectively.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. It's like creating that reservoir of goodwill that we can all kind of pull from when things maybe get a little tough.
Exactly. And what's really cool is that this whole concept applies to families of all shapes and sizes.
Mhm.
So whether you have small children or teenagers or adult children, those everyday moments of connection are still extremely important.
Now, I'm curious about this from like a scientific perspective. Does actually spending this quality time together change our brains in any way?
Absolutely. Research has shown that when we have these positive interactions with our loved ones, our brains release oxytocin. It's often called the bonding hormone. And oxytocin plays a really big role in fostering feelings of love, trust, and connection. So, it's not just about feeling warm and fuzzy inside. These little moments are actually rewiring our brains for stronger relationships.
Okay, that's really cool. So we're not just talking about feel-good advice here. There's real neuroscience behind this.
Yeah. And beyond that biological level, think about those shared memories and experiences that you create together, like inside jokes or traditions or even just stories. They all become a part of your family's unique culture. It strengthens that sense of belonging and identity.
And speaking of shared experiences, our source gives us a helpful list of activities families can do together. And it's a pretty wide range, from playing board games to going on hikes to just having conversations. But what really stood out to me was that it really emphasized finding activities that you all genuinely enjoy as a family. It shouldn't feel like pulling teeth.
Totally. There's no one-size-fits-all approach. It's about identifying the things that your family enjoys and making time for them. And that might look different for every family.
Right. So for some families, it might be cooking together, or maybe it's going to sporting events or volunteering in the community. The main thing is that you're doing something together and that everyone's enjoying it.
And that brings us to another really key point, which is consistency.
Mm.
It's not about making these grand gestures once a year or,
Mhm.
squeezing in a vacation. It's about building a rhythm of connection in your daily life. Even if you only have like 15 minutes you can spare, you can still make that time really count.
Yeah, it's really about being present and engaged in those moments, even if they're small.
Exactly. And this is where we can kind of circle back to Gottman's work on those bids for connection. When we're intentional about spending time together and responding positively to those bids, we're not just enjoying each other's company, but we're strengthening the fabric of our relationships.
So it's really those insignificant moments that really add up, like reading a story before bedtime or sharing a meal together or just laughing. They all contribute to something bigger.
They really do. And especially when those experiences are positive and consistent, it creates that sense of security and belonging within the family.
Okay, I love that foundation we've built here. But what happens when things aren't so good? How does this idea of family time kind of play out when we're facing stress or maybe conflict in the family?
That's where this idea of taking care of each other really comes in. Our source really stresses that we're all on the same team, and that means being there for each other no matter what.
And this isn't just a nice thing to say. There's research that backs up this whole team mentality, right?
For sure. For example, family researchers Barbara Fees and Maureen Winter, they found that families who have those shared rituals, Even something as simple as having dinner together regularly are more resilient when facing challenges. These rituals actually end up creating a sense of predictability and stability, which is really important when you're going through stress or maybe a big transition.
So even when things are a little chaotic, having those rituals and routines can provide a sense of normalcy and connection.
Yeah, exactly. It's like having a shared language, a set of unspoken understandings that can help you get through difficult situations as a team.
Right. It's a reminder that you're not going through it alone. You have this support system to lean on.
Yeah, and that's where the power of vulnerability comes in. When we feel safe and supported within our families, we're more likely to open up about our struggles, our fears, and our dreams.
I love that. It's like having this safe space to just be yourself, completely knowing that you'll be met with love and understanding even when you're not at your best.
Exactly. And Brene Brown, she's a researcher who spent her entire career studying vulnerability.
Hmm.
And she argues that it's this willingness to be open and authentic with each other that builds strong and healthy relationships. It lets us connect on a much deeper level.
This has been so insightful so far. We've really covered a lot of ground, from the science behind connection to those practical tips for maximizing family time.
We really have. And hopefully everyone listening is feeling inspired and ready to start putting these ideas into practice. Because at the end of the day, it's all about those relationships and connections with our loved ones that really matter.
Okay, so we've laid this incredible groundwork, but where do we begin? We've gone way beyond saying family time is good. We're talking about how and why now.
For sure. We're moving from theory into that practical application.
Yeah.
And a really great place to start is by actually dedicating family time. It's something that the CDC strongly recommends. And it might sound obvious, but actually scheduling it in like any other important appointment can make a big difference.
Yeah, it's so easy for those good intentions to get lost in the chaos of everyday life. So are we talking about a standing game night or a weekly dinner? Something predictable that everyone can get behind.
You got it. And it doesn't have to be anything fancy, just consistent. And this goes back to what we talked about before about those positive interactions and building that emotional bank account.
And those moments also create predictability, and I imagine that's really valuable for kids especially.
You're right that predictability is super important. And that brings us to another powerful tool, rituals. The Harvard Center on the Developing Child talks about how these seemingly small routines can really impact a child's sense of security and belonging.
So we're talking about things like maybe a special handshake or a song you sing before bed or maybe even just reading together every night.
Exactly. They provide a sense of continuity and stability, especially because the world can feel so unpredictable for kids.
Yeah, it's like there are these anchors grounding us in familiar and comforting routines. When I was growing up, we had this tradition of making pancakes every Saturday morning. It wasn't anything special, but it was our thing.
And those are the kinds of memories that stay with you. Rituals don't have to be elaborate or expensive.
Mm.
It's about finding those small things that make your family unique and just weaving them into your daily lives.
Hmm. Okay, so we've got scheduled family time and rituals. What else can we add to this toolkit?
One of the most powerful things is practicing active listening.
Hmm.
And I don't just mean hearing the words, but really being present and engaged when someone's talking to you.
Yeah. Putting down your phone, making eye contact, and actually focusing on what the other person is saying. And not just the words, but their body language and tone, too.
Exactly. It's amazing how much we actually communicate without even using words. Active listening shows your family that you care about their thoughts and feelings, and it just strengthens those connections.
It's like saying, you're important to me, and what you have to say matters.
Yes, and don't underestimate expressing appreciation. Tell your family you love them, thank them for the little things, and just offer encouragement whenever you can.
Sometimes it's easy to forget to say those things out loud, even when we're feeling them.
Yeah, for sure. But those small gestures of appreciation really do make a difference. They encourage those loving and connected interactions.
Okay, this is all great information, but families are all different, and what works for one family might not work for another. How can people listening figure out what's best for their unique family?
You're right, and that's where experimenting comes in. There's no perfect formula for family time. The most important thing is that you're intentional about creating those moments of connection and that you can adapt as your family's needs change.
So don't be afraid to try new things and see what works, and it's okay if things don't always go perfectly.
Totally.
Mm.
Family life can be messy, and that's okay. It's about progress, not perfection. What matters is that you're making that effort to connect with your family and that you're creating an environment where everyone feels safe, loved, and supported.
This has been such a helpful and insightful conversation. We've covered so much today. From the science behind these connections to very practical tips for making the most of our family time.
We have. And hopefully everyone listening is feeling inspired and ready to start putting these ideas into practice. Because it's those connections and relationships with our loved ones that matter most.
So, as we start wrapping up this deep dive, I'd love for you to leave our listeners with one final thought to take with them.
Well, I think one of the biggest takeaways is that we don't have to overthink this. You don't need to plan these extravagant trips or force yourselves to do things that don't feel right. Family time can be as simple as putting your phones down and having a conversation, or maybe doing chores together.
I love that reminder that it doesn't have to be complicated.
Right. It's about those small, intentional acts of connection
Hmm.
that over time build strong relationships.
And I also love that reminder about being flexible because families change and what worked last year might not work this year.
Yeah, exactly. And that's where communication is key. Talk to your family, ask them what they're enjoying and what they want to do more of. Be open to trying different things.
It sounds like a lot of this comes down to being aware, noticing those bids for connection, and being present in those small moments, and just making those little gestures of love and appreciation.
Yeah, I think that's a really beautiful way to put it. It's about changing our mindset from I have to I get to. You
Yeah.
know, I get to spend time with my family and create these memories and be a part of these relationships that bring so much meaning to life.
It's not a chore, it's a privilege.
Exactly. And that leads me to my final thought for everyone listening. As you go about your day, ask yourself, what's one small step I can take today to nurture the connections I have with my family? Maybe it's sending a text message to let someone know you're thinking about them or offering to help with something, or even just telling them how much you appreciate them.
I love that. Even the smallest gesture can really make a difference and create more joy, connection, and love in your family.
It's been great diving into this topic with you.
It really has. And to everyone listening out there, thanks for joining us on this journey. And remember, even taking small steps can have a big impact when it comes to building stronger family bonds. Until next time, keep diving deep.
Okay, so we've laid this incredible groundwork, but where do we actually begin?
Hmm.
It feels like we've gone beyond just saying family time is good. We're talking about how and why now.
Yeah, exactly. We're moving from like theory to practical application. A really great place to start is with dedicated family time. It's something that the CDC strongly recommends. It might sound obvious, but actually scheduling it in like you would any other important appointment can make a big difference.
Yeah, it's easy to let those good intentions just kind of get lost in the busyness of life. So are we talking about something like having a standing game night or, a weekly family dinner, something predictable that the whole family can plan around?
You got it. And it doesn't have to be anything fancy, just consistent.
Yeah.
And this ties back to what we were talking about earlier with, creating those positive interactions and building that emotional bank account. And those consistent moments, create predictability, which I imagine is especially valuable for kids.
You're right. That predictability is key. And that actually brings us to another powerful tool, rituals. The Harvard Center on the Developing Child really emphasizes how these seemingly small routines can have a huge impact on a child's sense of security and belonging.
So are we talking about things like a special handshake or a silly song you sing before bed or maybe even just reading a book together every night?
Yeah, exactly. They provide that sense of continuity and stability, which is really important in a world that can often feel unpredictable for kids.
Yeah, they're like these anchors,
Mhm.
They
Right.
ground us in those familiar and comforting routines. Like when I was growing up, we had this tradition of making pancakes every Saturday morning. It wasn't anything fancy, but it was our thing.
And those are the types of memories that stick with you. Rituals don't have to be, elaborate or expensive. It's about finding those small things that make your family unique and making them a part of your everyday life.
Okay, so we've got scheduled family time, we've got rituals. What else can we add to our family time toolkit?
Well, one of the most powerful things you can do is practice active listening. And I don't just mean hearing the words, but truly being present and engaged when a family member is talking to you.
It's about putting your phone down, making eye contact, and really focusing on what the other person is saying. Not just their words, but their body language and tone of voice, too.
Exactly. You'd be surprised how much we communicate without even saying a word. Active listening shows your family that you value what they think and feel, and it strengthens those connections.
Yeah, it's like saying you matter and what you have to say is important to me.
Right. And along those same lines, don't forget to express appreciation. Tell your family you love them, thank them for even the little things, and just offer encouragement when you can.
I think sometimes it's easy to forget to say those things even when we feel them.
It happens. But those small gestures of appreciation can make a huge difference. It's like they encourage more of those loving and connected interactions.
Okay, this is all great information, but families are all so different. What works for one family might not work for another. So how can our listeners figure out what's best for their family?
That's a great point, and that's where experimenting comes in. There's no one-size-fits-all approach to family time. The important thing is that you're intentional about creating those moments of connection and that you're flexible enough to adapt as your family's needs change.
So don't be afraid to just try things out and see what sticks. And it's okay if things don't always go perfectly right.
Exactly. Family life is messy, and that's okay. It's about progress, not perfection. The important thing is that you're making the effort to connect with your family and that you're creating a space where everyone feels safe, loved, and supported.
This has been such an insightful conversation, and we've really covered so much today, from the science behind connection to these very practical tips for making the most of our family time.
We have. And hopefully everyone listening is feeling inspired and ready to start putting these ideas into practice. Because at the end of the day, it's all about those connections with our loved ones. Those are the things that really matter in life.
So as we start wrapping up this deep dive, I want you to leave our listeners with one final thought, something to really carry with them.
I think one of the biggest takeaways for me is that you really don't have to overthink this. We don't need to plan these big elaborate outings or, force ourselves to do things that don't really resonate with us. Family time can be as simple as just putting the phones down and talking or maybe doing chores together.
I really love that. It doesn't have to be this big, complicated thing.
Right. It's those small intentional moments that really make a difference in the long run. Those are the things that build those strong relationships.
And I also love that reminder to just be flexible because, like you said, families change over time. What worked one year might not work the next year.
Exactly. And that's where being able to communicate with each other comes in. Talk to your family,
Mm-hmm.
find out what they're enjoying and what they maybe want to do more of, and be open to trying different things.
It seems like a lot of this boils down to just being more aware, noticing those moments where you can connect, and
Mm.
being present in those small, everyday things. Just those little gestures of love and appreciation.
I think that's a really beautiful way to put it. It's about changing our mindset
Mm.
from I have to do this to I get to do this.
Yeah.
I get to spend time with my family. I get to create these memories with them. I get to be a part of these relationships that bring so much meaning to life.
It's not a chore. It's a privilege.
Exactly. And that kind of leads me to my final thought for everyone listening.
Yeah.
As you go about your day, just ask yourself, what's one small thing I can do to nurture the connections I have with the people I love? Maybe it's something like sending a text to let someone know you're thinking about them, or offering to help with something, or even just telling them how much you appreciate having them in your life.
I love that. Even the smallest gesture can make a big difference, and it can create more joy, more connection, and more love in your family.
It's been so great chatting with you about this.
It really has. And for everyone listening, thank you so much for joining us. Remember, even those small steps can have a big impact when it comes to building those strong family bonds. Until next time, keep diving deep.